Liberally padded chairs were arranged in an appealing layout. A muted, calm choice of colors and decorations. Tranquil music played from the ceiling speaker, magazines filled the shelf, and an outlet was nearby for phone charging. The cardiac biopsy waiting room seemed approachable, but Mervin had come here enough times to know it was a facade. They were in the back of a plane and about to parachute jump. The stink of anxiety oozed from patients waiting their turn, for unease held them like the hand of a giant. Most did not speak, listening for when a doctor gave the order to hurl themselves into the open air. Protocol dictated that heart transplant recipients undergo routine cardiac biopsies to check for rejection syndrome. Mervin had been taking his immunosuppressants, and the previous checkups produced negative results, so it was unlikely that he would run into a problem, but there was still a chance. On top of the possibility of rejection, he'd have to go through that damnable procedure. They'd make an incision in his jugular and then worm a catheter through the blood vessel into his heart. Using the jaws at the end of the bioptome, the medical professionals would gnaw and tear and thrash to collect the sample. "It's just a small piece," they'd say. Fucking abysmal was more accurate. The worst part was that the procedure would happen while Mervin was conscious. They'd only give him a mild sedative and a local analgesic. He'd have to lie there, groggy but still aware, as they violated the sanctity of one of his most important organs. This was cruel and unusual punishment enacted for the transgression of coming into existence, a crime Mervin committed against his will. If the universe could be held responsible for violating the Eighth Amendment, life would be so much better. Mervin scratched his chest as images of vermiform creatures squeezing through tight spaces clouded his cognition. He tried to swallow his anxiety, but it was like attempting to force down a glob of poorly chewed food. His best bet was to use a more powerful stimulus to drown out the trepidation. Thus, he buried himself into his phone. This device was the culmination of human knowledge and creativity made portable. Whether or not the right diversion was there or not wasn't the question. It was about whether Mervin could find it. And so he scrolled, and clicked, and skimmed, and watched, absorbing everything but assimilating nothing. His mind was a log, writing in fast forward, and he was pouring a puree of sundry bullshit into the void. Tilt angle became more and more extreme until Mervin had completely inverted the bottomless pitcher.
"Hey, buddy."
Mervin started and looked to his left, almost dropping his phone. A man with a large beard sat there. For a second, Mervin succeeded in shutting the world out, but it wasn't because he found that greater stimulus. The search had been so frantic it provided the distraction Mervin was looking for.
Need something?
The man crossed a leg over the other. He clasped his hands and rested them on a knee. Took a long, deep breath. Not once did he turn his head to look at Mervin. He preferred to strain his eyes as far as they would go.
Excuse me?
The man offered his hand.
"I'm Stefan."
Mervin, it's nice to meet you.
He shook the stranger's hand.
"Do you agree that if a man puts in the blood, sweat, and tears, he should be the one who benefits from the fruits of his labor?"
Odd question, but I do agree.
"Should the progenitor be forced to relinquish his hard work because some random person needs what he strives to produce? Should he be the slave to people he doesn't know?"
Mervin shook his head.
"Let's say you signed a contract. It states that you have to, give your car to your brother if your college of choice fails to admit you. Let's say you don't get into this college. So your car is handed over, but then it's revealed to you that you actually did get in. There had only been a miscommunication. Should your car be returned to you?"
Yes.
Mervin fiddled with his phone, examined his lock screen despite seeing it numerous times every day. Anything to draw his gaze away from the unblinking intruder.
"But what if your brother really needs this car?
Doesn't matter.
What if your brother will lose his job without this reliable form of transportation? And it's the only job he can ever get."
Arrange for a different form of transportation.
Stefan smiled.
"From your responses and demeanor, it is evident that you are civil. I am sure you will help me with my mission."
Mervin leaned to the right, but the arm rests formed a cage. There wasn't anywhere he could go.
What is this about?
Stefan finally turned his head toward Mervin.
"Fairness and respecting your fellow man. Do you respect your fellow man?"
Stefan's voice had risen. Now everybody in the waiting room was looking at the pair. Under their collective gaze, Mervin wanted nothing more than to curl up like a fleshy pill bug.
Look, I'm just waiting for my biopsy. Please leave me alone.
Stefan stood. He pulled off his gloves, revealing pale hands that contrasted his dark skin, and then he discarded his hoodie. His sternum had been split, his ribs pried apart, lungs inflated and deflated with each breath. A heart should be nestled between these elastic organs, but nothing was there. Stefan's abdominal tissue had been sliced and peeled, laying his viscera bare. Despite lacking both a covering and myriad connective tissue, the complex of convoluted flesh corridors, the regenerative detoxifier, the acidic sac, all of it remained in place. Mervin fell out of his seat in his scramble to get away from Stefan. The other people skittered from the waiting room. The stranger, cool-headed and much faster, seized Mervin by the arm and pulled him up. Stefan shoved him back into his chair.
Fear is normal, but you need to calm down so you can think more clearly. Return my heart to me. I'll shoot you before I take it.
Stefan wrapped his holstered gun.
This will provide a quick, respectful exit. If you don't let me use my gun, you will experience immeasurable pain.
Look, man, Why? Why is that necessary? You clearly don't even need a heart. You're fine without it.
Fine.
Hands against his shoulders, Stefan pinned Mervin to the back of his seat. Stefan brought his weathered visage close to Mervin's.
Fine? I need my heart. My life is agony otherwise.
Then put yourself on the waiting list, or...
I can't do that! How about you do that?
I'm not going through surgery again just for you.
I went through the whole trouble of growing my heart and keeping it healthy. You're a fat ass, a pig, a piece of shit with no self-control. And apparently you're also a hypocrite. Our world will be better with one less person like you. You don't deserve to ruin my heart next.
If a normal person said that to Mervin, he would have hit them in the mouth. But this thing, he was too paralyzed by the thought of what it could do.
I don't know what the fuck is going on. Please.
I don't know what's going on either. I just know I need my heart.
You agreed to this.
I agreed to donate my organs when I die.
Stefan took one of his hands off Mervin, but this wasn't enough for him to wriggle away. The stranger ran a finger across the scar circumscribing his neck.
Clearly, accidental decapitation didn't kill me, so I require my heart.
What?
That's what I'm saying. Look, I'm offering you this chance for your sake. If you don't let me shoot you before I take the heart, the trade-off will be much worse.
What's the trade-off?
Sir, you have to step away from the patient.
Stefan looked backwards, pulling away from Mervin. This allowed Mervin to also see what the commotion was all about. A security officer had entered the waiting room. In this hospital, security personnel were armed, and he had his hand on his holstered gun.
Eat a dick.
Eat a what? What'd you say, sir? Could you repeat yourself?
Stefan turned around completely, allowing the security officer to see the full extent of the situation. Mouth agape and eyes wide, he retreated a step backward.
Oh, shit!
The stranger advanced with his arms spread.
I dare you to shoot me.
The officer took off just like the patients. Now that it was just harasser and victim, Stefan turned back to Mervin.
I'll give you one more chance.
Please, just leave me alone.
I guess I need to prepare for our party. All of you are always the same. It's so goddamn disappointing.
Mervin screamed as the stranger drew his pistol, but his harasser turned the gun upon himself instead. Stefan collapsed, his glassy eyes still wide open, blood escaping freely from the bullet wound in his head. The melody emanating from above once more became the dominant sound. It was a jazzy tune with a slow tempo, and this conglomerate echo of musicians past was played back at a subdued volume. The musicians on display were an interesting lot, for they had made their own instruments out of their innumerable victims. Arms and legs had been broken, twisted, and bent to make saxophones, these disparate body parts sewn together with hair thread, reeds of nail and gray matter cork. A piano, but toes and fingers took the place of keys, tendons pulled taut to form strings, skin and muscle protecting the precious chords. Trumpets and trombones were made out of bones and intestines, a mixture of blood, spittle, and cerebral spinal fluid lubricating the valves and slides. The fine craftsmanship of these instruments had pushed them out of the hackneyed realm of brassy noise and vibrating strings. The instruments of the psychopathic ensemble could remember. In response to the blowing, to the pressing and sliding, they screamed and begged and cried, and Mervin vomited.
Fuck, I only came here for a biopsy.
Days later, Mervin stood in the bathroom, gazing into the sink at the running water. For a while, he had kept Stefan off his mind, but no matter how much effort Mervin put in, the results were only ever temporary. The dark cloud of contemplative anxiety always came back. How did Stefan manage to find him? And would more lunatics take advantage of this security hole? If Stefan's condition was physically possible, what other secrets did the world have tucked away? Would these secrets also be thirsty for Mervin's blood? What about the other people in his family or his friends? Footsteps and creaking ersatz wood prompted him to look up. He saw his wife, Tatiana, through the mirror. She was picking her afro out.
Stefan is dead. There's nothing to worry about anymore, honey.
He told me he was decapitated, his organs harvested, yet that wasn't enough to kill him. There's no guarantee he won't come back.
They don't just have him in a morgue like the last time he died. Stefan is wrapped and locked in a box inside of a box. These boxes are thick and heavy as hell, and he is guarded at all times.
We don't know the extent of his power. The only way to stop him is to cremate him and scatter the ashes.
And why do you think that will work? You just said we don't know the extent of his power. Mervin, there's no point in stressing over this. All we can do is trust that they will keep the situation under control and continue living our lives.
She stuck the pick into her mass of hair, grabbed Mervin by the forearm.
Come on.
Mervin let out a long sigh and then let her pull him out of the bathroom. They chopped and seasoned and sauteed and baked, a duo of hunger bound by a single, elongating yarn of conversation. The further into it they slipped, the more Mervin's worries faded, seemed less like an immediate danger and more like half-faded memories of a horror movie. By the time they sat down in the living room, their food piping hot, Mervin had successfully jettisoned Stefan from his mind. With each bite and episode, it became less likely that the unwanted cargo would find its way back onto the aircraft. The warmth of his wife, the endless procession of entertainment, the contentment of his belly, it had a soporific effect. Their comments and laughter faded until they had become two discarded sacks slumped against each other. Knocking roused Mervin.
I'll get it.
Mervin made his way to the front door and peeked out of the window. There stood Stefan. His hands, lungs, and guts were rotting. Hadn't been this way a few days prior. The stranger smiled and waggled his fingers at Mervin.
Shit!
What's the matter?
Tatiana scrambled to get up from the couch.
Stefan.
Oh God, you were right.
Stefan pounded on the door.
I need to leave. Now.
Just you?
He's only after me.
And you don't think he won't do anything to me just to get at you?
Stefan hit the door so hard he damaged the hinges and cracked it.
You're right.
They ran into their bedroom, which was furthest from the entrance. As Mervin drew the blinds and undid the window locks, something crashed. Mervin opened the window and sliced the screen. He and his wife jumped out, screaming for help as they sprinted into the night. He received his transplant 4 months ago. His chest had healed. His body didn't realize their heart was foreign, and he had dropped a significant amount of weight. Despite all of this, Mervin found himself short of breath as he reached the edge of his backyard. He stopped by a tree. Hands against his thighs, he took a moment to collect himself, hoped the darkness would provide ample cover.
We have to keep going.
Gotta go back for the car.
No keys. He's back there. The neighbors are just up ahead.
The neighbors had their lights on. Mervin knew they heard the screams, but that didn't mean they had the courage to personally assist him and Tatiana. However, he was confident that at least one of them was in contact with the police.
I see you over there.
Mervin looked backwards. Stefan was on the other side of the window they jumped out of, watching them but making no attempt to pursue. The stranger appeared tired, sad even. Mervin straightened out, ignored the pain radiating from his chest. This time he jogged lightly rather than sprinting, but a hammer struck him after only a few steps. He went to a knee. Sweat stung his eyes, and he had to constantly wipe it away.
I've shown you how good I am. I've shown you how indestructible I am. Yet you still decide to act this foolish. I'll give you one more chance. If you take another step, we'll do this the hard way.
Leave while you still can, Tatiana.
Tatiana grabbed him by the hand and pulled him up. Leaning against his wife, they trudged forward at a much reduced speed. A sudden stab drew a scream from Mervin. He slumped over, felled by the unremitting assault. With him making no attempt to support his weight, forward progress halted.
I'm sorry.
Stefan vaulted out of the window and easily closed the gap, shoving the pair to the ground. Stefan's hand was clenched, and it trembled as if he were trying to keep something still. The moment Stefan released, the agony in Mervin's chest subsided to a dull ache.
Leave, Tatiana!
Tatiana lunged for the gun holstered on Stefan's hip. Having anticipated such a move, he was able to evade. Stefan drew his pistol and shot Tatiana in the knee.
Try me again and I will kill you.
Stefan grabbed Mervin by the hair and dragged him a fair distance from the writhing Tatiana. He then straddled his victim. With him this close, the stink of putrefaction was so pungent, Mervin had to swallow his welling vomit.
No, stop, no!
Stefan seized Mervin's wrists.
These should hold me over until I find my hands.
There wasn't much force in Stefan's pull, maybe enough to move a few pounds, but it still disconnected Mervin's hands. It was as if the body parts lost the will to remain attached. Blood spurted from Mervin's abbreviated limbs. He thrashed and cried for help. Stefan's right hand fell off and he replaced it with Mervin's. The stranger repeated with the left. He then tore Mervin's shirt off and pressed his stolen palms against the true owner's chest. Sternum split, abdominal tissue folded open. His ribcage moved apart on its own, a crab shell pulled open by a starving ghost.
And this viscera too.
Stefan plunged his hands in, wormed his fingers about, smiled as he listened to the squelching, the wet, moist sound of stroked innards. Mervin was too horrified to avert his eyes as he screamed. Stefan's rotting guts fell away as he lifted Mervin's out. He placed them in his desecrated abdominal cavity. Stefan had to reach back in a couple of times to grab all of it. He even took Mervin's lungs, robbing him of his ability to breathe. Organ placement was haphazard, but there was nothing for Stefan to worry about. They currently were rearranging themselves.
Now for the main event.
With a single touch, he initiated a cascade effect. First one vessel detached, then two, for exponential growth. Stefan lifted the still beating heart from Mervin and stuffed it between his new pair of lungs. He drew a deep breath, his lungs visibly expanding.
2 down, many to go.
Stefan removed himself from Mervin. He stared at the writhing, bleeding creature beneath him. Without lungs and a diaphragm, Mervin could not vocalize, but his mouth still moved pointlessly. Stefan spat on him.
You think this hurts? Bitch, you better be thankful I woke up in the middle of the operation. Those bastards would have taken so much more.
Stefan left Mervin to his gaping, throbbing pain. It was the sort of agony the brain tried its hardest to protect you from. With no such mechanisms working, Mervin was forced to lay in the midst of it, exhausted from blood loss and oxygen deprivation, listening to distant sirens and the whimpers of his wife. He fully expected to die, but instead stayed on the brink of suffocation, was assaulted with unending hunger, and could not shake the veil of torpid weakness. No blood flow meant no ATP production, yet Mervin could still twitch and shuffle. Death evidently did not want to reap him. There was more to do with his life. What could that be when Mervin was forced to exist in this half state? He had no answer for that question, but he knew his wife thought he was dead. Mervin gritted his teeth.
You can do this, you can do this, you can do this.
And lurched to his feet, immediately falling over. Although lying down once more, his new position allowed him to see Tatiana. Shock had put an end to her groaning, and she stared wordlessly. Mervin could not tell if she was more afraid of his bodily condition, or the fact that he was still alive.